Hey, it's your pal Mike Shea from SlyFlourish.com, here with a special episode of Sly Flourish's Lazy DM Prep. This is going to be a post-mortem look at Chapter 2 of Descent into Avernus. I've been running Descent into Avernus as an irregular game on different nights, so I haven't done prep videos before I run them, and instead I'm going to be doing a video like this after I run each chapter, although Chapter 3 I'm probably going to break up into multiple videos, in which I talk about my experiences having run that chapter and what changes I made and what worked well and what didn't work so well, in hopes that you can learn from it. This video, like all of my videos, is thanks to the patrons of Sly Flourish. If you go to patreon.com/SlyFlourish, you too can become a patron of Sly Flourish. You get access to a monthly newsletter. You get access to a unique adventure just for patron supporters called Regnum Ratus, the Rats in the Cellar. And you get other little odds and ends, access to a Discord channel and things like that. But today we're going to be talking about Descent into Avernus. So I have two or three other videos I've done. I think it's two other videos where I covered the introduction to Descent into Avernus and talked about the most important things that you need to know in order to run this adventure. I'm going to reinforce it right now. You can go back and look at those videos to get a deeper look, but I'm going to reinforce the things that helped make this adventure run much better than I think it would have run out of the box. And the biggest thing you can do to make Avernus run well is make sure that your characters, before you begin, during your session 0, make sure your characters have a strong tie to the city of Elturel, the Hell Riders, and Rhea Mantlemorn, the NPC Rhea Mantlemorn. If they have a strong emotional connection, if all of the characters have a strong emotional connection to Elturel, to Rhea Mantlemorn, and to the Hell Riders, all of the rest of this adventure becomes so much smoother than if you try to run it out of the box, where they have to build that motivation along the way. And it's really hard to motivate level 5 characters to go into hell for a city they've never seen to help people they don't really know. So that's my number one tip for Descent into Avernus overall. But today we're going to be looking specifically at chapter 2. So I've got some notes that I wanted to talk about. I want to thank my friends here on Twitch today. I'm on Twitch right now. I want to thank my friends on Twitch who have helped me put these notes together to kind of get my head in the right place while thinking about Chapter 2. So the number one thing I noticed about Chapter 2 is that it was much easier to run as is than Chapter 1, and that I expect Chapter 3. I have a feeling Chapter 3 is going to require the most work to modify to get it where I want it to go. Than anything else. But Chapter 1 needed a fair bit of work too, mostly in needing a better introduction. And the introduction I recommended for Chapter 1, another video about it, is the DM Guild adventure called The Fall of Elturel by Anthony Joyce and Justice Armand. I highly recommend that intro adventure. It does exactly what I talked about reinforcing the character's connection to the Hell Riders, to Elturel, and to Rhea Mantlemorn. Really important. So the nice thing is that with Chapter 2, we really didn't have to do a lot of extra work. It really runs pretty much as is. Here is my, let's see, we're going to go to Chapter 2 here. Why do I have that search box up? Go away, search box. So this chapter all takes place in Elturel in Hell. You start off having teleported into Hell after the whole situation with Candlekeep and learning about how Thavius Krieg cursed the city of Elturel, and now it's trapped in hell. Not everyone's dead, and here you show up. There is a flow chart in the beginning of this chapter, and it's, a flow chart's probably an extreme. It's like a list of the main things that happen in here. There's no flow because there's no decision trees. It's all bang, 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 bang. But it works, right? It works pretty well. You arrive in Elturel, and you travel through Elturel. You get to the High Hall, and you meet the refugees of Elturel in the High Hall. They lead you to find Oldar Ravengard in the Grand Cemetery. And in the cemetery, you meet Gideon Lightward. You meet Oldar Ravengard, who is currently, he's like knocked out from the artifact he got, or from the Gate of Baphomet, one or the other. And you bring him back. Oh, and you fight, you close a demon gate, a demon gate to Baphomet, and then get out of the Grand Cemetery. And then you bring Oldar Ravengard back to High Hall. You restore him from consciousness, and he tells you, he gives sort of the next big view of where the whole story goes. And that story is, we need to get the Sword of Zariel. It's at a place called the Bleeding Citadel. It's out there somewhere in Avernus. We don't know where it is, and we need to get it. But then the real goal of this this chapter, the one thing you want to make sure that the chapter does is that it leads the characters to Fort Knucklebone, which is their first stop in Avernus. So one of the things you want to learn about is that, yeah, they know that there's this place called the Bleeding Citadel. You know that the Sword of Zariel is there, and that the Sword of Zariel is required, or is potentially an item that can save Elturel. It can shatter the chains and save Elturel. And that it's missing out there in Avernus, and no one knows where it is, but very few people know where it is. But then you need to say, like, one person who can help you find out is Mad Maggie in Fort Knucklebone. It's probably a devil that might tell you that, but there's a few ways that they could learn that. They can learn that from Lulu. They could learn that from from the Shield of the Hidden Lord. They could learn that from one of the devils that they deal with along the way. So there's a few ways they could learn that, but that's kind of the next most important thing that, leads you out of chapter 2 and into chapter 3. So it's important to keep that in mind while you're running it, because you want to make sure that information gets out there to the players at the right time so that they will leave Elturel, go down to Avernus, and head towards Fort Knucklebone. So one of the wild cards that exists throughout this whole chapter, and I think throughout much of the book, is the Shield of the Hidden Lord. It's possible and probably likely that the characters pick this up somewhere in chapter 1. And it is possessed by a demon lord named Gargoth, a very, very powerful demon lord. Some even think it's a demigod named Gargoth. And you have to think about, like, well, what does Gargoth want? So one of the characters probably has the shield. It's a really good shield, like fire protection and +2 shield. All right. Really nice shield. It's rare that somebody won't take it. And you probably don't want it to have it to be too evil. You probably want it to give some useful information, but you also want to make it sinister, right? And they know this thing's not quite right. And they know what's in there. And they don't know what's going on. And Gargoth is a great source for secrets and clues, right? So is Lulu, right? They're great ways to pass information to the characters. And they are both unreliable narrators. They don't have to give all the secrets. Gargoth might only give the information that he wants to give. And his goal is escape the shield. I don't know how he escapes the shield yet. And I don't know who in Avernus might know. And maybe he doesn't know. So, but that's a continuing thread. It's one of the interesting circumstances where an item is a character, an NPC, and the item has a quest it's trying to fulfill that may go in parallel with the characters or may not. But right now it's probably in parallel. And Gargoth, the Shield of the Hidden Lord, is a great way where whoever's wearing it can get visions of, like, I see a place and I see a person there, and maybe they're the one. Gargoth says, go see Mad Maggie at Fort Knucklebone. She can tell you what you need to know. So that's one way. So the wild card of the Shield of the Hidden Lord is something to keep in mind when you're running it. There's really sort of 3 main sections to this chapter. Traveling through Elturel overall, which you'll do a number of different times as you go from place to place. You go from the place where you teleported to Highhold. You go from, it's called Highhold, right? Do I have that right? Yeah. You go from places places that you go from where you teleported into to Highhold to the cemetery back to Highhold, and then leaving Elturel. So there's lots of times you're traveling through Elturel, and it can be a lot of fun. And what I recommend is that, like, really reinforce the theme of Avernus, right? This is they're like standing in a human city, but the city is floating above the river Styx, hundreds of feet above the river Styx, and hundreds of feet above the surface of Avernus. The sky is swirling red fire. There's the starscape. The rare times they can see it are alien and uncomfortable. There's weird things floating out there. There's devils flying about, right? There's all these kinds of things. It's a scary, scary place. It's a place that humans are not meant to walk, right? And yet here you are. And then they might get little bits and pieces that you probably want to dole this out over time, not all at once. That when they start off, they see the sky, but it's not until they reach the first bridge and they look down at the crack where the bridge is spanning over and they see that it just falls on hundreds of feet below to the river Styx. And you're like, oh my God, we are, it's the first time you really get the feeling you're in hell. So you want to reinforce that. You don't want to just give a monologue for, 15 minutes. You want to drop pieces of this in as they go. And there's all these things that you want to reinforce. The huge chains that are binding Elturel, the big stakes that the chains are connected to, the charred landscape of Avernus below, the river Styx, and the souls that are floating around, and how huge demonic creatures come out and vomit forth armies of demons, and then devils are there in formation waiting to fight them. The blood war. You want to reinforce the blood war. It's a real important backdrop to this whole campaign. And then one thing I did is I actually had Zariel's ship come in. Zariel is on sort of a huge spike-looking structure that sort of floats over, and I had it sort of float by as though she's kind of, she's sort of growing Elturel into the thing that she wants it to be. And she might go and take a look at her flowers and see how things are going, and then floats away again. And it gives this, it's a way of foreshadowing. And you can really foreshadow a whole lot of stuff in this chapter. It's a great way to drop a lot of seeds of things and then have those seeds grow throughout the whole rest of the campaign. We'll talk about some of the other seeds that we have here. The book itself has a good list of random encounters that you can drop in while the characters are traveling through Elturel. I don't recommend dropping in a whole lot of these. I would kind of read through the list, find the ones you like, and drop in probably one encounter in between each major landmark that they go to. So if they're going from the place they teleported to the first bridge, have a random encounter between there and the bridge. Then there's a fixed encounter at the bridge. Then from the bridge to Highhold, maybe have another encounter. And I wouldn't drop a whole lot of these. I myself, the way I've been running this game is in 3-hour sessions about every other week. So I want to move the pace pretty quickly. I don't want to linger. And so I picked like 2 encounters. I think they face like basically 2 or 3 encounters total in between their travel from place to place, like one encounter per travel. There is another excellent third-party product called Encounters in Avernus. This is done by a whole host of many of the best creators for freelance creators for D&D. MT Black, James Hake, James Intercasso, Rich Leskifer, Sean Merwin, and Ashley Warren. It's a platinum bestseller. It's $6, very highly rated. And it's an excellent book of encounters, both in Avernus and in Elturel and in the River Styx. It's got a lot of really great material here. I have a very particular desire for random encounter books, and this one hits that desire of giving more information than I could get from just random monsters, but not so much that I can't run it on the fly, right? And that was really a good design. Like, to me, a good designed random encounter is one where it's more than I could do on my own, but not so much that I can't do it. I can't improv it while I'm running the game. So I highly recommend this this encounter, or this product, and it has good random encounter information for Elturel if you want it. I was happy with the stuff that was in the main book, so I didn't actually use it for Elturel, but I probably will use it for chapter 3. So there's another one of the encounters in there. There's an encounter where a Narzagon, which is a very powerful. Let's take a look at the Narzagon. The Narzagon is a very powerful Hell Knight, right? That rides in on a nightmare. It has, fire lances. It's very CR13, very powerful monster. You don't want to have the characters fight this thing because they'll just die. If they're like level 5 or 6, hopefully this thing would kick their ass, especially on the nightmare. It's flying around and throwing hell lances. But there is one of the named Narzagons is a fallen hell rider named Haruman. There's a place called Haruman's Hill in chapter 3. So you can foreshadow having them see a Narzagon. And like going through the city on its nightmare and having devils follow in its wake, hunting down mortals to try to recruit into the blood war. That could be a fun thing for them to see in a distance, and then can foreshadow seeing Haruman later. And they could learn about that knight. They could be like, oh, wait a minute, that knight's a fallen hell rider, one of the 3 top hell riders that rode in with Zariel when she first came to Avernus, and yet it's still here and it's been converted. How interesting. So that's a fun thing to foreshadow, and something I foreshadowed, and I'm glad I did. So the first major landmark that the characters get to is Highhold. And at Highhold, they learn a lot about the next stages of their journey. This is their chance. You fight a few devils on the way in. You actually get to fight an Abishai, a white Abishai, which is kind of cool. And then you get to meet with the refugees, the remaining refugees of Elturel that have hidden in the crypts beneath the Highhold. And what you learn is that Oldar Ravengard, who is the High Duke of Baldur's Gate, has left for the cemetery, the Elturel cemetery, in search of an item called the Helm of Torm, or the Helm of Torm's Sight, which he hopes will give him a vision of what they need to do in order to save Elturel from hell. So then another thing that you can kind of foreshadow here, this is sort of an interesting arc that I added in, that it's tied a little bit to Fall of Elturel. Which is Gideon Lightward. So Gideon Lightward is a priest in both in Fall of Elturel and in chapter 2. I kind of screwed up and I made him the leader of the Hell Riders. So he was sort of the current leader of the Hell Riders, which then had a strong tie between Gideon and Rhea Mantlemorn, and thus a stronger emotional connection. And I had it mentioned that in Highhold they said, yeah, Gideon, when we first got here, Gideon left for the cemetery. He kind of him he sort of left us here and went straight to the cemetery. And then Oldar figured that Gideon was going after the Helm of Torm's site and that he might not have made it, so he's going to go after it too. So Oldar followed Gideon to the cemetery. And that sort of foreshadows what happens with Gideon and some changes that I had with Gideon. So then once they know that the next stage in their journey is get to the cemetery, find Gideon find Oldar Ravengard and return him here and find out what he learned from the Helm of Torm site. So now they have another journey. Again, you can run another encounter between their journey from Highhold to the cemetery. They get to the cemetery. There's things to fight outside the cemetery, Minotaur skeletons. So one of the things is that Baphomet, the demon lord Baphomet, has opened a gateway underneath the cemetery in the crypts beneath the cemetery, and has so there's a lot of Minotaurs running around, Minotaur skeletons and stuff like that, and so the characters get there and they might meet Gideon there. And Gideon in the book is sort of a weird undead thing. He's kind of a mummy. He kind of does some other things. It's not really clear. All it is like he's an undead dude. And I was like, why not make him a vampire? Like, we have another fallen Hell Rider that's already a vampire. And that one is Jander Sunstar, which we meet at Haruman's Hill in chapter 3. Wouldn't it be interesting if Gideon was also a vampire and had been a vampire all the time Gideon was leading the Hell Riders in Elturel? So the fun bit of backstory I had here is that Gideon Lightward was the leader of the Hell Riders and had been since the vampires were pushed out of Elturel centuries before. And that's when the deal was made, and that's when the big shining companion showed up and kind of burned the vampires away. That was actually like a century ago. Gideon was one of the 3 knights who rode with Zariel into Avernus, and only Gideon returned from that. And Gideon said that she has fallen, but we can maintain our force here. Well, in truth, what happened is that 3 knights, maybe 4 knights, because there's also the one who planted the sword of Zariel. So, you can have like the tale of the Hell Riders can be an interesting one that sort of comes out over time. And Gideon could be one of those. And Gideon, when the characters meet Gideon, he can give them his story, which is the Hell Riders have always been about fighting evil. And we can fight the worst evil that's ever existed, which are demons that are infinite, and they come from infinite worlds, and there's an infinite number of them, that, we can fight them eternally, and that our mortal flesh is a cocoon for what we really are, which are devils that serve in the blood war for Zariel. And Zariel figured this out, and now we still serve her. And that could be kind of this split of, the Hell Riders who continue to maintain their loyalty to Zariel after she fell and bent the knee to Asmodeus. Some followed her and some didn't. And one of the ones that didn't was Jander Sunstar, who is also a vampire. So you can kind of have that. Some of the knights turn into vampires. You can have like one of them turned into the Narzagon. So that's Haruman. So you can plant a lot of the seeds of the knights of the Hell Riders when they meet Gideon. And in my game, I was like, they already just fought a bunch of stuff. Do they really want to fight a vampire on top of everything else? So I had Gideon sort of zip away. Like when he realized they weren't going to follow, he's like, well, he shook a finger at them and said, we're going to meet again one day. And then, vampire ran out the door and disappeared. And like, oh man. So, but you could have him fight a vampire. You could have him. One of the things I had kind of planted on or worked on was like when they got to the cemetery, he said there is a gateway to Baphomet below the cemetery. In the ossuary, and you need to go down there and close. If you want to save Oldar Ravengard, you have to go down there and close that gate. And I will protect the cemetery up here from these skeleton minotaurs that are rising up out of the ground. And he's fighting like dozens of skeleton minotaurs and just ripping their heads off and shattering their skulls with his bare hands and doing all kinds of cool vampire stuff, right? And the characters go down and they deal with the portal. And then when they come back, he's wounded, right? He's been beat up and he might have half his hit points. He might have lost like a lot of his legendary actions, and then they could fight a vampire, right? And then maybe if they beat him, he'll burst into ash and disappear, or maybe vampire disappears away, or maybe he doesn't even fight him. Like they're not even worth it. You're just going to die with every other mortal here. It won't matter. And then he disappears. So there could be a bunch of ways. But I think having Gideon be a vampire was kind of fun. So when the characters go down into the ossuary, they can actually fight. So there's some demons and devils down there. But one of the things I thought was fun, they talk about the minotaurs coming out of the gate. And I said, but these aren't real minotaurs. These are hellish minotaurs. So we can add sort of the fiendish trait to the minotaurs. And adding the fiendish trait means basically taking all the common traits that you would apply to demons and applying it to them. Magic resistance, immunity to non-magic or resistance to non-magical weapons, dark vision, stuff like that. And so you can just basically look at the common elements of the demons and apply them to the Minotaur stat block. And now you have a really cool fiendish Minotaur. It's a really easy reskinning technique that I recommend, by the way. Taking some traits from one monster, applying it to a different monster, now you have something completely new. So that's a fun way. And then for closing the portal, I had 2 pillars. I don't remember what's in the book, but I know that I had 2 pillars that had to be shattered for them to close the portal. And if they didn't shatter the pillars in time, more minotaurs would come out of the labyrinth, and they could see the labyrinth out through the gateway, the labyrinth of, they could see the entire labyrinth of Baphomet's realm through the gate, which was really cool. So that's a lot of fun. And then when they come back, they deal with Gideon. They return to Highhold with Uldar Ravengard. Uldar Ravengard takes up through some work, maybe a remove curse, maybe some Arcana and religion checks. You can save Uldar Ravengard, and you get a vision of where things need to go. You need the Sword of Zariel. The Sword of Zariel is kept in a place called the Bleeding Citadel. The Bleeding Citadel is out there lost. They get the vision of the knight. I forget her name, but there's a knight that served Zariel, and Zariel gave her Zariel's sword before bending the knee. And this knight took it out into the middle of Avernus, stabbed it into the ground like Excalibur, and now it's out there like a festering wound, like a splinter that can't be healed in the landscape of Avernus. And it's sort of boiled up around it, right? And now there's this place called the Bleeding Citadel that surrounds it, but nobody knows where it is. Very few know where it is, but somebody might, and that somebody that might be Mad Maggie at Fort Knucklebone, who can help out. And that gets us our next step out of Chapter 2 and into Chapter 3. The last thing that happens in Chapter 2 is the characters have to find a way to descend the chains and get down. I was pretty late in my game. I didn't hand wave it, but I basically said, some of you use fly, whatever methods you have, climbing, flying, and you can't even tell how long it took you to climb those huge chains to get down to the surface. And it was very precarious. But you did make it down. You made it to the surface. You place your foot down on this alien landscape, realizing that as a mortal, you have no right to be here at all. Looking up at the sky and seeing Elturel and seeing the black companion hanging above it and the bolts of lightning, hoping that your friends can survive while you go find the sword. And that's a pretty powerful conclusion to this chapter and a good way to lead into the next one. So that's my thoughts and experiences having run Chapter 2. I thought this chapter ran pretty well. I have a feeling Chapter 3 is going to be a much bigger deal and require a fair amount of work to move into the style that I want. And in future videos, you will see how I handle that. But hopefully this video is useful. If you like this video, please consider becoming a patron of Sly Flourish at patreon.com/SlyFlourish, or take a look at my book, Return to the Lazy Dungeon Master, in which we offer tips and tricks for getting the most from your prep to run great D&D games. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you again soon.